Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the OwnCloud show. Now today I'm really excited to be over in the Nextcloud offices over in Berlin, and I've got a very special guest today. I've got Jos, who is the marketing director of Nextcloud. Now I'm sure many of you guys have heard of Nextcloud. It's an absolutely awesome open source project that empowers organizations and individuals to take control of their data and own it for themselves. So Jos, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
Yeah, thanks for coming. It's really cool that you came over all the way to, dark, dank and snowy Berlin.
It's been wonderful. Thank you very much for having me. Anyway, I'm sure our audience is eager to get to know all about Nextcloud, but I think before that, myself and the audience get to know you a little bit better with a section I like to call quickfire questions. And so, the purpose of this is I'm going to ask you a question. It's going to be an A or B answer. And you're not allowed to think about it too much, Jos. No kind of like taking 30 seconds to answer.
All right.
Just straight off the top of your head. Okay. Android or iOS?
iOS.
Text messaging or phone call?
Text.
And console gaming or PC gaming?
PC.
And what's your favorite game?
Supreme Commander 5, basically.
Right.
Forza lives forever.
And desktop or laptop?
Desktop. My love is there with Linux on the desktop.
Yeah. And what is your web browser of choice?
Firefox.
Yeah, good choice. Vim or Emacs?
Vim.
And what is your favorite open source project besides Nextcloud?
OpenSUSE. With a nice, reliable operating system. I'm not entirely unbiased. We'll get to that.
Yeah. And hiking in the mountains or exploring a new city?
Oh, new city.
Yeah.
Especially if it's old. Very old.
Well, I think I'm going to know the answer to this next question coming up then. If you could travel in time, would you go back in time or forward in time?
Oh, back.
Yeah.
And I have a coffee or whatever the hell they drank back then, if I'm Rabbi or someone like that.
So Jos, you've had an incredible journey in the open source world, from being active in KDE to serving as the OpenSUSE community manager. And now you're leading marketing at Nextcloud. Could you share a bit about your background and go into detail of what you were doing before you came into being the marketing developer at Nextcloud?
Yeah. So early 2000s, I had the same problem as a lot of people had. They were on Windows 98. Windows ME was a unmitigated disaster. And XP came out, and it was terrible in the beginning. And I decided to explore some other operating systems. I played with BEOS. That was kind of cool because you could play more than one MP3 file at the same time and it wouldn't stutter. That was still very special back then. Yeah, but I settled on Linux. Yeah, I settled on Kubuntu via Knoppix. So that was one of these live CD things that was still fresh-ish back then. Yeah, and I started using that and really enjoyed it and starting to play with it a lot. And then when visiting a tech show, trade show-ish thing about tech, back then you bought your CDs and DVDs still physically at like one of these tech shows. There was a KDE booth and they needed help. And so, I had read enough about KDE to basically chime in. And then they asked, hey, can you come by the next week? We have another event in Amsterdam. And I was like, yeah, sure. And yeah, it went downhill from there, basically. So yeah, I ended up helping organize KDE marketing. And I did that for a very long time until, I got a job at SUSE as community manager and for OpenSUSE. And I did that for a number of years until a good friend of mine, Frank, he asked if I wanted to join him at OwnCloud, which he had founded. It was kind of cool because when he announced it in 2010, we were both at a KDE community event in San Diego, even in the same hotel. Epic times, lots of rum and fun in general. And there he had announced that he wanted to create this self-hosted alternative to back then Dropbox, right? Because at the time, Dropbox and Google Drive was where more and more people were putting their data. And of course, Frank, he was at the board of KDE at the time. And, both as KDE people, he saw like a problem with like KDE being great on the desktop, and it was a wonderful operating system, with Linux and as a desktop KDE on top. But if everybody puts their data at Dropbox and Google, then, we actually haven't gained any computing freedom, right? Like this was changing the game, basically. And so, he, in 2010, he basically announced he was going to try and change that. He started the project in January, I think, but the first code drop came in February or March. And then very quickly, a bunch of people joined him. They already had their first meeting in about 2010, late in the year. And in the meantime, I was working at OpenSUSE then as community manager. And, we kept in close contacts. I actually often gave talks running OpenSUSE and OwnCloud on a Raspberry Pi. That became like a nice subject for events. And we even had OpenSUSE people working on the first desktop client for OwnCloud. So there was a good relation between the projects. Sometimes we even shared a booth and stuff like that. And then, at some point he asked me to just join OwnCloud. I was like, well, you're already promoting it anyway. Why not just come on board and do that full time? So I became community manager at OwnCloud. And, when that fell apart, the company, we started the Nextcloud together with a bunch of other people.
How long has Nextcloud actually been around in the form it is?
June 2, 2016 is when we announced it. June 1, we started to build the website.
And just going back to, you're saying Frank was worried about kind of things like Dropbox and Google Drive. How long had Dropbox and Google Drive been around for? I can't remember when they actually...
Around 2005-ish.
Well, that's right. They've been around for about 5 years at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
And so basically Nextcloud was born out of OwnCloud.
Exactly.
Can I ask, why was the fork made?
Well, so basically OwnCloud went bankrupt, and obviously we had seen that coming, wasn't doing well. Some bad management and complicated relation with investors and all this stuff, venture capital, which in principle I have nothing against. It can be good, but you need to have a good win-win setup, especially with open source. And it can be tricky, and, management kind of failed to properly handle that. So, Frank had already left in, I think, April or May. And then, in June, basically, I joined him, and more joined in the coming 2 months, while OwnCloud went bankrupt. And then what was left was bought up by a German real estate guy.
Right.
Who kind of, kept it going a bit. Most of the engineers went with us. And, now it's been sold again.
Yeah, what was that kind of export it?
I knew them because they used to be called Acelian.
Right.
So they make also file sync and share software, Dropbox and they're a bit bigger. And then they went on the shopping spree. They bought a couple of file sync and share companies.
Dragoon and Maytech, I believe.
Yeah. So I'm guessing they're gonna consolidate on their products
and just make one product out of the three.
Yeah, I don't think they'll merge it. You can't really. What would you get out of that? I think just move everybody over to one of them. Which, I would be surprised if it is Dragoon or, one of the other small ones.
So, the team at Nextcloud, how big is your team?
We're now a little over 100 people.
Wow. And who are the key players in the team?
Many of the original people are still there. Not all. I think a handful have left. 3, 4, 5. But there are people at the company, several, who have been involved since 2010, basically. It's kind of the thing of open source, I think, right? People care about what they do. And if the project doesn't go bad, then you can keep doing it. So we have Robin. He was a KDE contributor, I think, at the time, and started to contribute then to OwnCloud initially, doing a lot of the file storage handling. He wrote things like the external storage feature.
Wow.
And he's still doing that basically. We have Arthur. He comes from the Kubuntu community, so very close. He did LDAP back then. He recently moved on from LDAP to Talk. He wanted to do something new after 10 plus years, 12 years.
I just found the external drive plugin very useful.
It's cool, right?
Running unrated servers. basically we can use that to connect to some of our normal shares.
Yeah.
Without having to actually upload them.
I have the same at home. Like I have an old server, it's an old desktop I turned into a server with a couple of drives that has music and movie collection and private pictures and stuff. And most of those are just local directories mounted as external storage. And I also access them directly via NFS. So, yeah, I mean, these features, I mean, if there's something wrong, I know who to talk to. That's
so when you mount an external storage, do you prefer to do it like over the network, like there's a network external storage, or do you kind of mount it as a mount point into the Docker container?
So in my case, because it is all local, like I have one server and all the drives are in there, and on there runs then now the Nextcloud all-in-one Docker container. And there, I think when you think in the command line, when you started basically in the environment variables, you set like the mount points, and so I did. But those are actually local drives.
Yeah.
And if there were network drives and I had them on the NAS separately, I would probably use the native protocols, so like FTP or Samba, etc. in Nextcloud, because it can then do smarter stuff, like a range find. Like if you go to your Nextcloud and you want to watch a 5 gigabyte video and you want to start in the middle of the video, Nextcloud has the ability in most cases, depending on storage then, to simply start in the middle of the file, right? And not first transfer the whole file and then see to the middle. That would be a pain in the behind. And yeah, I would guess that such features and support for these kind of things would come first to the native support. But it also depends on how you've mounted it. I mean, I bet NFS supports this as well. So if you simply have an NFS mount and then you give Nextcloud access to that, it'll also be able to immediately go to the middle of the file. So I don't know how much difference it makes, honestly. But yeah, I'd probably still go for the native stuff just to be sure.
And so with the team, obviously we're in your office in Berlin here. Mm-hmm. Do you have multiple offices, and is the team, what's the geographical location of the people for the company?
Well, I mean, we have people in Hawaii and Canada and India. So basically, I don't know, out of the 100 people or 100 plus people, I don't think more than 15% has an office. The rest works from home. That's still the primary mode. And I mean, that's going to stay that way because we hire people wherever they are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have, I think, 10 people in Berlin. So that's technically our biggest office. And then we have like 7 or 8 in Stuttgart. And that's it.
Right.
So the rest works from home.
So you're a pretty modern company with a hybrid work, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of companies started working remotely from COVID, but you've been doing it really since day one.
Yeah, but it's also kind of the open source model. You know, like this started as an open source project right back in 2010. And the nature of it hasn't fundamentally changed. So we now have a company and, you know, you have SLAs with customers, like there's process and engineering and management on top. But all our work is still happening in GitHub. You know, people sometimes ask me for a roadmap. And I mean, what can I tell you? Look in GitHub because everything is there. There isn't, it is all transparent. It's actually so transparent that a lot of people then tend to think, but there must be more. So then they don't, it's really hard to get in people's heads that, what you see really is what you get, you know? Of course, we have secret repos because we have security issues, you know, and customer issues that we handle separately. But we really put in a lot of effort to make the default to be open. You know, like the chat rooms on Talk on our company server, there are tons of community members in there. Most of them are open. So the conference is of course open to anyone. So we try and work as transparently as possible. And this is really confounding people sometimes. It's like, you must have some secret plans. Like, well, other than what's maybe in Frank's head, you know, and then yes, that's a big vision guy for sure, or maybe the stuff I think of, less big vision for sure. But there's not more than that, that's for sure. It's really,
So I was talking about free and open source software. I think a lot of people, they've heard the words, but they don't really know exactly what it means. Can you explain to the audience exactly what is free and open source software?
Yeah. it's a rabbit hole because you can go very deep because it stems from the 80s, right? Where a guy had trouble with his printer, famously. But I think it has changed a bit over time. So there are these two camps. You often hear, like you asked in the 10 quick questions, you asked a few things, but one of them you didn't ask was BSD versus GPL, or, free software or open source, or even Linus Torvalds versus Richard Stallman. And so these all come to the same point, this question of like, what is the point of open source? And I mean, open source you can define as like, you have an official definition, which is really about like availability of the source, but also what you can do with it. But I think the key question is always like, is about freedom and whose freedom. So free software and free and open source software is about freedom of often the user. So it's less about the developer, because if you write software, normally speaking, it's yours. And you can make it available under whatever terms you want. It's usually protected by copyright. Obviously, all warranties are denounced, right? I mean, if you buy a very expensive piece of software and it does something incredibly stupid, then the license will tell you that, sorry, your problem. Which is quite amazing, given almost every other product has some warranties, but it doesn't. But that's your right as a software developer, of course. But the user can be completely locked in by the choices you make as software developer. You can make webcam software that you can use to check up on the safety of your baby, for example, like a baby monitor. And that stores all those data recordings in a file format that is like, encrypted and compressed. It cannot be read by anything or anyone unless they pay you money. And like this way, you can completely limit people's freedom to do what they want. For example, take out some funny recordings of something that happened and, put it on YouTube or, you know what I mean? Like, you're in control as software developer. And the point of free software is generally to actually move this access of control over to the user. And so most well-known free software licenses, including the ones that Nextcloud uses, they guarantee the 4 freedoms, which a proper nerd start, of course, counting at 0. So freedom, I don't have the order exactly right, but it's more or less like you have the freedom to run the software wherever and however you want, the freedom to study the software, the freedom to make changes, and the freedom to share it with whomever you want. And there's one limitation too, which is usually not immediately mentioned, right? You have the 4 freedoms. There's one limitation. If you distribute it, if you take advantage of the 3rd freedom or the 4th, how you count, you have to share it under those same rules. Mm-hmm. So I can give you a piece of free software on, 80s style floppy disk, right? Or today, give you a download or an app, and you can make changes to it and then give it to, another friend. But you have to give them the same freedoms that I gave to you. So they should be able to, again, run it wherever they want. You cannot say, look, I don't like you running it, for your backpack club. I think people should go in the mountains, I should say, in the city. So I don't put a restriction on it and license, and you can't use it for a club. No, you're not allowed to do that. And you're not allowed to take their freedom away to make copies of it and give those again to other people. So it's a bit of a viral license, or in the words of the amazing Steve Ballmer, cancer. They were not a fan of Microsoft in the beginning of this concept, to put it mildly, because the whole has to be covered under this. So if you make changes, they also have to be covered under this rule. So your mate can not only then copy on and hand over the software that I gave to you, but also any changes that you made to it fall under the same rules. So, of course, this does not have anything to do with money, right? All of this is about freedom, as in...
I think a lot of people think free means as in kind of free beer,
right?
And it doesn't. It means freedom.
Not necessarily, but of course, if I give it to you and you give it to 20 other friends, and then I decide to go and charge money for it, it's going to get tough for me, because, well, all these other friends of yours have the ability to give it away for zero cost. Yeah. So there is a downward pressure, to put it in such a term, on the price. So the software itself tends to get cheap or free. However, that's purely the code. And so there is a lot more to code as it is on GitHub versus an actual running product. There's a big gap, and that is partially about the code. It needs to be compiled, needs to be put together. You need to make a build, it needs to be installed and managed. But of course, also everything around it. And it's obvious because writing the code isn't free. There's still somebody who got paid to do it, at least in many cases. I mean, we at Nextcloud, we could have kept this as a, volunteer project. But then we wouldn't have been able to pay like 60-ish full-time engineers to work on it. Yeah. And that's what it takes. I mean, our goal with Nextcloud is to take on Microsoft and Google, right? Like, we think that it is not good that there are, 5 or 6 big tech companies that control 95% of all the data that we as a society generate. I mean, we can talk for hours about why it's bad. I would just say, I don't think we'll have a democracy much longer if it continues to be that way. I think it's really a huge risk for freedom with a capital F. And so we want to make an impact on that. And I really appreciate and respect all the projects that try to run really as like volunteer shows. And I mean, an organization like Amnesty gets pretty far, but let's be honest, that's not run by volunteers now, is it? In the end, if you want to make a real impact, you need money. And you can try and do it on donations. And like, if your thing is to save baby seals, that it's not that hard to get money from the general public. If you talk about like the freedom to compile code yourself, most people will just stare at you and think, I have other things to do. So it's very hard to run something like Nextcloud on donations. So we wanted to make an impact. And for that, you need a competitive product. You need something that can compete with Microsoft 365 and the speed they're developing. And it's a huge speed. It's going very fast. And we want to give people a real alternative. So we need resources for that. So this fully volunteer-based, it's all free thing, this fundamentally doesn't work for that. And thankfully, free software absolutely doesn't preclude building a business around it. And if you think of Red Hat, that's a free software company, right? What they do is all open source. But it's $1 billion company, right? Multi-billion dollar company. So it's possible. And it is a bit harder to do this around open source.
What are the kind of challenges with an open source company compared to like a closed source company? Must be unique challenges to the business model that other businesses would.
A lot of it is explaining, honestly, because a lot of people, they look at it from a very technology point of view, and they think, well, but the code, the lines of code, the way, as it is there on GitHub, I can just download it. It doesn't cost money. Why would I pay you? So there's difference between here's a bunch of code and here's a product that as a bigger company, you can actually run and that has everything you need for the success of you as a company. If you're running for 100,000 users and it's down for 8 hours while you're Googling how to fix a problem, will you still have a job if you're the one who recommended this to your boss? This isn't going to go well. This doesn't work. And so we have what we call Nextcloud Enterprise. And it's basically the product that gets you a successful deployment, which comes with then our support and documentation expertise around large-scale deployments and getting performance on larger systems. And the hard part, the problem that you ask for, is effectively to explain this difference to people. It's often that the C-level people at a company, they often get it. And especially governments, they often have rules about it. And we're not going to run software that's just randomly being pulled from the internet and just pray and hope that it works, right? We need something. But there are also companies that don't get it. And the problem is that, of course, anybody who can download Nextcloud and run it on, well, something, might think they have the expertise to run it for 100K users. And so there are quite some companies who offer services and support around Nextcloud. Some of these then engage with us. They are become partners, resellers of our enterprise product, basically. And so if their customers run into a problem, they will try to fix it first, right? They do the first level support. They help you, like how do I upload a file kind of problems. But if it gets hard, then, the person who developed LDAP will be the one who fixes it. You know what I mean? Like, this gets you guaranteed the fix at the fastest possible time. Can't say it's all fixed in 2 hours, but nobody can fix it faster, obviously. But there are also a lot of, especially smaller companies, that offer it to other smaller companies. Yeah, and if they get in trouble, we sometimes talk to these providers and they say, well, look, I'm getting paid, $10 per user per month. And if there's a problem, I'll Google it. I'll ask your engineers on GitHub, right? Get free support. And yeah, if that doesn't fix it and the customer gets angry, I give them 2 months for free. And if they then leave, then so be it. And I get that works for them as a business. But this is bad for the brand Nextcloud. Because those customers, first of all, probably thought that they paid for Nextcloud. But they didn't. They paid for a random person running it.
Another company kind of selling the product and support can basically give that whole user, if they have a bad experience, that is the experience they have in their mind about Nextcloud. Even though it's about the support they receive.
Exactly. Because, as I'm trying to say, you cannot separate the code from the product experience you have. And when you think you can, you just download it and run it and think it's all fine. But, your users who are not technical like you and don't think in terms of lines of code, they might end up having an unpleasant experience because you didn't realize there's more to it. And yeah, this is annoying. Our support team, they get contact requests from people who are like, yeah, I paid for Nextcloud support and my problem is not getting fixed and can you fix it? I'm like, look, sorry, you didn't pay us. You didn't talk to an authorized reseller. You just paid a random guy or girl on the internet. And what did you expect? Yeah, I'm sure it was cheaper, but you paid for hot air, right? That's kind of the issue. You're paying for something, but you're not getting it. Because in the end, in a way, Nextcloud is, Nextcloud Enterprise is, in a way, it's a bit of like an insurance. If something goes wrong, we will fix it no matter the cost. And the health insurance that only pays up to $1,000. That's not really health insurance, right? Because up to $1,000 you could cover yourself.
Yeah.
But if you get a serious car accident or a serious disease, it's going to cost way more. And suddenly you're standing there in your underwear that you don't actually have covered. And so it's the same with this. This is definitely a challenge when you're running an open source company, I think. And this is something I'm sure other open source companies see too. It's just explaining the value of the product versus the lines of code. This separation is just a tough conversation. And of course, for home users, we as a company don't try to monetize that because I cannot help every home user. And honestly, we want to make Nextcloud good enough and easy enough to use and run that a home user doesn't need us or a small business, right? If you're 5 or 10 people, you will notice we're not even selling anything to you, right? Our website, our subscription for Nextcloud Enterprise starts at 100 users. And it's not even that cheap at that level. You need to be bigger before it becomes more affordable.
Right.
So because we designed Nextcloud to be quite easy to use and to run, in a basic scenario for 50, 20, 30 users, it should be fine. If you really want to run it yourself, you should be able to. You can ask for help on the forums and you can ask for help on GitHub if there's a problem and you will not hear anybody complain. If you try to do that for 10,000 users, well, honestly, first of all, that's not very smart. And yeah, it's not really cool to then go into our community of home users and try to get them to help you with your problem that they would never have. So it's trying to balance here between the home users for whom we kind of started this project.
Yeah.
Right. At a personal level, I'm a home user too. But for businesses, they pay the bills.
Many of our listeners, they run their own servers in their home. They run RAID servers. So they're quite passionate about self-hosting, data sovereignty.
Oh, good.
But some of them, they may not, we haven't really talked about actually features of Nextcloud. So,
Right.
So could you briefly explain what Nextcloud offers, both kind of companies and the kind of self-hosted at home? What type of things can they expect?
As a replacement for Dropbox, so you can upload your files, you can share them either with other users or via public link. And this was the core functionality for a long time. But we always had a app infrastructure where people could build apps. And already in like 2013, there came calendar app and a contacts app. And so this became really a big deal. A lot of people use that. So when we started Nextcloud, we knew there was a lot of demand for these functionalities. And more than that, the industry was moving from just sharing a file to like working on a file. Collaboration became important. So we've been developing since 2016 a huge array of really collaboration platform features. So I think of Microsoft 365, right? You can edit your documents, you can share them, you can have a video call and edit them in the video call. And these are all things that Nextcloud can do.
Right.
So it's really a wide array of like, it's email, calendar, and contacts. It's video call and chat with Nextcloud.
I think a lot of users, they kind of think that Nextcloud is only file sharing, but
Right.
There's all we have a thing like Nextcloud Talk.
Yeah. And we use it internally, right? It's a complete platform on which most average businesses can probably do all their like back office work. All the spreadsheeting and mailing and internal chat. You can all do it. I mean, we do webinars with hundreds of people on Nextcloud Talk ourselves. We've even done a conference using Nextcloud Talk.
The Nextcloud Talk, should someone want to talk to someone who doesn't have Nextcloud server themselves, they can send them a link to that, and so then that person can join in
via the browser
through their own self-hosted.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the same as with the files. You can send a public link to a chat room, and then people can join the chat room. They get a little pop-up that says, please give your name, and they can join. They can chat there, and that's persistent, of course, unless you delete it. You have access rights, so you can just say like, okay, this guest, I don't know who it is, kick them out, or take away their rights to speak and to turn on the camera and all that. So you have a lot of like controls there, because of course, first of all, again, we do this for privacy control. So there are a lot of like features in Nextcloud, like expiration dates and passwords on shares, which we already did like in the early 2010s, while these are more recent features by Dropbox and others. We have, for example, a really cool feature that kind of brings files and talk together that you might notice from banks. So like at a bank, they need to send you an email, but they don't want to send it to you because then it goes to your Gmail and Google can read it, right? So instead, they send you a message that says, hey, there's a mail in your inbox. Now you need to go there and you can see there then the emails. So together with our Outlook integration, we actually have a similar feature where the email is actually stored on Nextcloud and then an email is sent. Another feature there that we have is, we call it video verification. And that's on the integration with Talk, where I would send you a link and the link asks for a password, but I did not send you the password. Instead, there's a button that says call. It'll start a video call with me, and then I'll give you access. So basically, first face-to-face, we talk with a video call before I just let you in, which is really cool, I think. And then really bringing, these things together.
And I was lucky enough to see a video that you were making into Nextcloud Hub 7 yesterday. And I believe in Talk, there's reactions now.
Yeah, right.
Can you just...
Oh, yeah. That's initially like just the thumbs up, to a chat message. But now also, indeed, in a video call, like you can do a thumbs up or, party popper thing that they can fly over the screen. And that's really cool. Yeah, these little features, you can do a note to self, there's a menu on each message and you can then turn the message into a task. You can set a reminder on the message. You can say, hey, 24 hours from now, I want to get a push notification on my phone reminding me of this chat message. So you don't need to deal with it immediately. You can even do that on a file, by the way. Just remind me, we have on files, we have on chat messages, and on emails, kind of snoozing the email. So that's really cool. And you can then also forward the message to somebody else or to your own note. So turn it into a note. Now you have a chat. So say Signal has this too, I think, like a note to self, where it's only you in the room and you can put all these messages there.
Yeah.
So it's really
It's really useful.
a ton of useful stuff.
You can share some kind of insights into use cases for Nextcloud that may be a little bit different out of the box use cases. We all know, basically companies use it, and I believe governments use it, educational institutions use it. Lots of big companies use it, but what are some of the more obscure use cases you may have come across, Jos, using Nextcloud?
So let me first give a big one. I mean, it's not super common just because it's big. There's a really big telco provider here with a very bright pinkish color that has several millions of users on a single instance, which, I mean, they give every customer of them 15 gigabyte, I think, of free storage space there. So that's kind of an interesting case, of course. They also are adding more functionality now, since it's getting more and more interesting what users get with their phone contract, basically. And then what I thought was always a really interesting use case was a couple that was getting married. They took a Nextcloud instance on a Raspberry Pi, which is one of the Pis with Wi-Fi, and they put it at their wedding, like in the room, and they asked all the guests to connect to it. Now, when you would connect, there's always this like capture portal that you get, but this capture portal would basically go to a public link where people could drop photos in. So they asked everybody in the audience to upload their photos to this Raspberry Pi. So they would get all the wedding pictures, at the end of the wedding there. And they told me there was a massive added benefit to it. Because they did it because they wanted to prevent ugly pictures, getting posted by grandpa on Facebook going out. But because everybody was connected to this Raspberry Pi that had no internet connection, there were also no notifications going off. No phone calls during the event because nobody had internet. So that was a nice win-win.
That's smart.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really creative use case.
And as well, it's just amazing that, Nextcloud can run on such a variety of different hardware, like a little Raspberry Pi up to,
really
clusters of servers.
Yes. Yeah, but again, that's really important for us. That's also why we are still maintaining SQLite support. People often say to us, but SQLite, what is that good for? Well, if you just have a super simple LAMP stack, you don't even have the M in LAMP, right? You just have a very basic online service that you pay just a few bucks a month for, where you can just put in PHP files, a place where WordPress works, but almost nothing else. Well, Nextcloud will work too. And that's really important for us because, again, we do this so that everybody can use it. So, we put an effort to keep it easy to use, even though we're adding all kinds of super advanced stuff these days that requires, unfortunately, other languages than PHP, right? Certain things you want to do cannot be done in PHP. Like example of push notifications. So in Nextcloud, the moment the file changes, this desktop client starts syncing because it can keep a constant connection open with Nextcloud. But that requires a little daemon in Go, and it requires Redis because that's how it knows when something changes. And we can't just do that in pure PHP because you can't keep a connection open for that long. So if you just run the super basic version, then you'll have to wait up to 30 seconds before it starts syncing. And similar with like a notification on your phone, we support push notifications. But again, it can take 30 seconds if you don't have this little daemon running. But it'll work because that's important, right? There is always a fallback to just pure Nextcloud.
So, Nextcloud runs on a lot of different hardware, but probably the hardest hardware, in inverted commas, to get it to run on is people who are maybe not tech savvy. Like, if I was to ask my dad to install Nextcloud, he probably just wouldn't really know what I'm talking about. He may have heard of Dropbox from one of his friends that he can back up photos. So what is Nextcloud doing to try to overcome the problem of getting people to be able to use Nextcloud who aren't tech savvy and they don't want to run their own server. Is there anything for them that you're trying to do to encourage them to get on the platform?
Yeah. This is an interesting challenge, and so we've tried a bunch of things. We had, for example, quite some years ago, we had the Nextcloud Box project, where we built a device together with Canonical and Western Digital that basically you could buy. I think it was $100, which came with 1 terabyte drive. Back then, it was a pretty good deal. Took a tiny bit of assembly, but just putting some plastic parts together and putting in a chip, and then you could just go from your browser and you had a running Nextcloud, basically, that was updating automatically thanks to snaps. And that was nice, but it's still, you would have to open ports in the firewall. I think your dad thinks that a firewall is a thing that you see in movies with a hacker doing weird stuff. You know what I mean? Like, this is not a solution for still non-technical people. And we thought a lot about it.
I think my dad, the firewall was part of the firewall.
Exactly. Exactly. He would probably open that up to be able to run Nextcloud on the internet. So this is a long-term challenge that we've had, and one solution we came up with a number of years ago is we call it simple sign-up. And so what our goal was to make it as easy to sign up to Nextcloud as it is to Dropbox, and still be decentralized, right? So how does it work with Dropbox? Well, you most likely will go to the App Store, look for Dropbox, download the app, say, I don't have an account yet, sign up, give an email address, give a password, accept their outrageous terms of service, which you don't read anyway, and then you log in and you have like 2 gigs of free storage. So what we did is we have an experience where you search for Nextcloud on the App Store, you download and install the app and open it. You say, I don't have an account yet, sign me up. You give a username, you give a password, you sign much less outrageous terms of service, and you get between 2 and 5 gigabytes of free storage. So how do we do that? Because we don't host, right? And we don't want to do hosting. We make software, stick to what you're good at. What we have done at the first step, when you entered your email address, we also looked at your location based on IP address. And we picked a provider for you as close to you physically as possible. That's part of the program. And so these providers then give you a free account, unlimited in time, but with between 2 and 5 gig of free storage. And I mean, usually you can pay them to get more storage. It's for how they make their money.
Right.
So accomplished, we have the same user experience as Dropbox.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's really cool,
So no setup involved at all.
Exactly. You're just logged in.
Could you choose your own geographical location if you wanted to?
Yeah, you can scroll down from where you enter your username and password and say, okay, pick another.
So if someone was using a VPN.
Right. Yeah, you can also do this via the website. So you can just go to our website and there's a sign up, and you can just there also sign up, and then you get the information and the URL.
I'll make sure to put a link in the show notes.
Cool. Yeah, this is really nice, and we're proud of having been able to make that happen.
So your question, just looping back to the open source list of Nextcloud, obviously community plays a big role in it. If someone in our audience actually wanted to get involved, how would they actually go about doing that?
So it depends a bit what you want to do, right? But if you want to learn coding or design, then we have a page on our website, nextcloud.com/contribute, where you can basically, find guides, tutorials, and other stuff. If you want to build an app, which is now possible in any language you want.
An API.
Exactly, yeah. So you can build a Nextcloud app still the traditional way in PHP, but since the conference earlier this year, we announced that you can now build apps in Ruby, Go, Python, whatever, Haskell, if you really want. For COBOL. So we support pretty much any language. It has a restricted set of abilities, but we're working, of course, to expand that. And then for the Hub 7 release, we also made it super easy to install these apps. So if you say, hey, I dabble in Go, I want to build an Nextcloud app, well, go to nextcloud.com/developer, and you can find tons of tutorials and information. Or if you say, I have an app, I wrote a notes application, and I want to make it possible to store these notes in Nextcloud for this, we have the Open Collaboration Services OCS API, which makes it super easy to connect to an Nextcloud server, retrieve login data and get those files then stored there. So to connect to an Nextcloud service, we also have tons of documentation on that.
Oh, that sounds awesome, Jos. So there's a lot of talk nowadays about AI, and Nextcloud has embraced AI into its system. Can you explain a little bit about what makes Nextcloud different with its use of AI compared to other solutions out there?
Well, in a nutshell, what makes us different from everyone else? It's, under your control. So interesting fact is we've been doing AI, AI is of course like a buzzword. So in our marketing, I usually group a lot of stuff under AI simply because for a lot of people, the technical side doesn't matter. So if it is smart, I'll call it AI. Recommending people to share with. But that's of course not using a neural network. That's just using statistics of who you share with a lot. But we've actually been using like a PHP library that lets you train and run a neural network for at least 2 years, maybe even longer. So we use this to log logins of users. So for each user, we record when they log in and where they log in from. And I think the client too, or something. It's like 2 or 3 factors. And then we train a neural network on that. And when you do something weird, we'll give a warning, or can even, warn the administrator. So what this does is basically,
and obviously, if I can interrupt, this is on the user's own server. It's not you.
Exactly.
I just want to make that point clear to people listening.
So this runs on your own Nextcloud server. And it's a very simple, small thing that we've had for years. We call it suspicious login detection, because that's what it does. It basically trains this network on like where you typically log in. Let's say you work 9 to 5 every day from the office in Bristol, and suddenly there's a login at 3 a.m. from China. That's probably not you. So you would get a notification from suspicious login detection, and as admin, you can even say, let's block that. And that's a neural network. That's pretty fancy AI, but it's been there. It's been there for years. It works in the background. People probably barely realize that is technically AI. Another thing is we've had like a priority inbox for quite a while, where again, on your server, a neural network is trained on your emails. We've recently improved this. We're also training on the subject line so that it's getting better at basically predicting whether it is an important email for you or not. And then, you have this inbox that has hopefully the most important mails on top there. Completely on-prem AI. And then last year, we also introduced face and object recognition in the Nextcloud Photos app. So you have your photos, and then it will go over it and group the faces and name objects. And you can then say, oh, that face, that's my dad. So you just give it a name, and then you will see. And if you then search for your dad in the search, you will see all the pictures of your dad. Yeah. So this feature was also already there for a year. And again, all running locally.
With the scanning of the photographs, does it have various things already that it knows what it is, or do you have to, like, say a dog, put it into it?
It's pre-trained. It's pre-trained.
So I wouldn't have to say that is a dog.
No, that would, because you would have to tag thousands of images of dogs before it would get it. That would be a bit too much. So it has 2 parts.
Only the people who tag the people.
Exactly.
So
yes. But it's already trained on recognizing faces and grouping them. So it'll group the faces, and you get a folder with pictures of hopefully the same person. I mean, it's not perfect, of course. It might make mistakes, but it's fairly okay at it. And then you can change the name. And then groups and dogs and airplanes and trees, it'll recognize and tag, basically, so you can find them.
So I'm assuming with AI features in Nextcloud, this is where you're going to need maybe a more powerful system to run to get good results, and maybe even on a Raspberry Pi Zero.
Yeah, so the suspicious login detection, the priority inbox, they're pretty light. These were running already for years, and they were fine, and you don't need anything special. When we introduced the images and object recognition, this app needs like a neural network, which is like a file of about 1 gigabyte big, So we already bumped into a first problem. We now need to download a gigabyte of data, and a 60-second timeout on a PHP process is going to be a pain.
Yeah.
So this was already where we had some more trouble to make it work. And then, of course, came, end of last year, where ChatGPT came. And, we said to each other, okay, on one hand, we want to offer, the abilities that this brings and try and allow people to benefit from it. But it has to fit our DNA. It has to be transparent and on-prem as far as possible. But then you do want to give people a choice, right? Because running a large language model on your server, if you have a Raspberry Pi, it's just not going to happen.
No.
It isn't going to work, period. So we spent quite a bit of time thinking about this, and we came up with a rating system for AI. So we are supporting these new capabilities like language generation, voice recognition. What else do we have? Transcription of calls, right? You can do a talk call, you can record it, and then at the end, the recording can run through a voice recognition speech to text that poops out like a text file with the call. All these features we have, and in most cases, we have them in multiple variants, with usually one of them being like OpenAI, for example, right, which offers that as a service, which is, it's fine for some stuff, but for other stuff, you don't want to send your data to OpenAI.
Yeah.
And so, we put these choices in the App Store, and we put in what we call the ethical AI rating. So basically, each of the services we rate on 3 points. Namely, is the code that runs it and builds it and trains it, is it open source? So that you can actually, retrain and build and check and look if there's no nasty stuff in there. Is the model available to actually run locally? Because if you can't run it locally, then even source code doesn't help you much, right? If it runs in the data center. And last but not least, is a training data set open? So that you can actually, with the open source code, you can retrain the data model, make it maybe more efficient, make it smaller to run on your system, remove bias, right? There's tons of crazy stuff in these models. That's not always cool. With biases and other issues. If the training data is open, you could do something about it. So we take these factors and we say, okay, if it complies with all three, it's open source, can run wherever you want, and the training data is open and transparent, that is green. If it doesn't have all three, but only two of them, so let's say you can run it locally and the code is open source, but the training data is proprietary. Let's say the training data is the database of Spotify because it's a song recognition AI, just to mention something somewhere random, then it's orange. If it only has one of these three, then it's yellow, and if there's none of them, it's red. So ChatGPT is obviously red, but GPT-4All, which is a local runnable AI model that is completely open source, training data open, etc., would be green. And then you get a choice. What do you run? What do you install on your server? And then on your server, you choose what model is used for what. So you can say, look, my images are generated by an external service, because that's fine. But I want call transcripts to be done locally. So voice to text needs to be done locally because I have my calls. I don't want that stuff to leak. And text generation, we do nothing special, and ChatGPT is great, so we'll use it. You know what I mean? You have a choice.
So you can just have a hybrid mix, so you can choose exactly what you want.
Exactly.
To install them through an app or whatever you want, and nothing's installed by default unless you want it.
Correctly.
And we know from the rating system
what you get.
What yes, and so that's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, so that's how we've done it.
How do you go about external AIs? Obviously, there's cost in using them. If you had a bunch of users, is there any way of making it so they can't?
Right. Yes.
And it costs a lot of money. Is there?
Yeah, you can put limitations on the use, so you can have a per user limit, and you can put that in. So many tokens for text and so many images for the images. Yeah, but that's even useful, I think, locally, because if you're a university with 50,000 students and you say, hey, that model that Nextcloud now has that can generate text for us. Let's turn that on because we got a couple of servers with a few GPUs in them. So great. And, 150,000 students think, oh, that's great. I'd love to have my next, work that I need to deliver tomorrow be edited and summarized or even just written by our GPT-4o model. Then, your server will be extremely busy.
Yeah,
so you
it's not just a cost thing, it's a resource thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. I mean, this stuff is really heavy. I mean, you have a choice of models like the Llama model we support, and then you can choose like the smaller, the medium, or the big one. At home, I've played with the medium one, and that's working pretty okay. I mean, it generates useful text. It can make a headline. It can summarize a text. If you ask it, to write you a blog post, it's not great, but that's okay with me.
If you feel like a home user, what kind of power of hardware would be needed for running learning the best AI models? What do you consider the minimum?
Yeah, I mean, at the Raspberry Pi, it probably won't run because one of the problems is it needs a lot of RAM, these models. I have at home a Haswell system, so that's not the newest, quad-core i5, and it has 16 gigs of RAM, and I haven't bumped into hardware problems. It does take a minute or two sometimes to generate like the reply or an image or stuff. So it's not fast, but it's fine for me. And our UI is pretty optimized for so when you do a request and you say, okay, draw me a picture of two dogs and I don't know, whatever. Then, you can just basically tell it the background itself. You just get picked on your phone or on your desktop, hey, image is generated, you click, you can see the results. So the user experience, even when it's slow, it's fairly okay. I mean, when you sit there waiting for it, then that's not great. But if it takes a few minutes anyway, you can just say, okay, well, I'll move on. I do my other stuff and I'll see the notification come in when it's done. So I would say, as long as you have enough RAM, you can run anything, and the limit is going to be your patience.
Right.
Because, of course, it's not fast. But most of them do support hardware acceleration.
So you can leverage CPU.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you got a 4090 with a ton of RAM, then you can still not run the biggest models, but you can get pretty far, obviously. And then, you can totally run this. And so the all-in-one container, which is what I'm using myself since a few months, is really amazing, and it supports all of this. So it can spin up a container for a local AI, and in there then you can download a bunch of models. You just need to put some magic JSON file, and then in the JSON you put the models you want, and then when you fire up the container, it downloads them, and then they're available in the UI to choose from. It's really neat, and then you can just enable hardware acceleration then. That's just a parameter when you start up the container.
I know I'm doing when I get back to Bristol.
Yeah. Look, it took me some days to get it working, but I'm not very technical, although I must admit I have a cheat line directly to the people who worked on it, obviously. But I got it working, and I can tell you it's freaking amazing. It's so cool. So I mean, all this stuff big tech is throwing billions at, you can have it. I mean,
people just don't realize you can run AI yourself. Yeah, I just think they think AI and they think ChatGPT.
Right. And they think Microsoft, like Google, but we're not limited to big tech, we can do this stuff. I mean, it is beautiful to see a ton of models being developed. It is, of course, tough because making a model costs, several hundred Ks until several millions just to run the training data through the model to get all the weights and to basically have a trained AI. But there are a ton of people who've basically done this already. So you have these base models and you can build on them. And this happens a lot in the open source world. So there are a ton of interesting, cool open source models that can do all kinds of really good stuff that are freely available and can be run on your server. And what we're working on, if I can pitch a really cool feature that's brand new in Hub 7, an obvious question, wouldn't it be great if your AI knew you, right? So what we've built is, we call it context chat. So we have the Nextcloud assistant, and this is one of the premier ways in which you could interact with, especially the large language models. So in Nextcloud on the top right, if you have it enabled, you have this little button that calls up the assistant. The assistant then gives you a dialogue where you can ask it something. It's even integrated in Nextcloud text. So for example, you could just select a piece of text and call up the assistant and say, summarize it for me. Or, generate a headline, and it will give you the headline. And so with context chat, the questions that you ask can actually take into account the data you have. So we have a service that indexes your data, all your documents, your files are not there yet, but we want also emails, chat messages, everything else. And then you can basically say, hey, what are the tasks that my boss sent to me by email and chat in the last week? And it'll just take that out of all your emails and chats, make you a summary, say, okay, your boss asked you to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these things, and it's super cool.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So we have a tech preview of that available by the time this podcast comes out. I mean, you got to be pretty techy and tenacious to get up and running. I can already tell you that because by the time I got my AI stuff up and running, it was already beyond tech preview. It's already a little bit polished. I say a little bit, there's a lot more to do there. Well, this is really rough, but it's possible. I've seen it demoed, I've seen it work. It really does work. And I think it's really awesome. It is really the next step. Yeah, then your AI can just help you with your work because it knows you and your work. I think that's really amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people just have no idea about. It's in Nextcloud. It's super exciting.
Yeah. On your own server, right? No data leaking. It just stays there.
And the things you want to outsource, you just use that.
Right, of course. Because this also works with an external AI. So you can actually have this database, it's called a vector database, with all your data that needs to be generated by Nextcloud. You can have that local, but then use ChatGPT or a local service. There are companies that are now starting to offer large language models as a service. So you can just find a local company actually you do trust.
Just gives the user choice.
Exactly, yeah. And then you can connect it, and then that AI from that company that's hosted maybe in your city, can answer your questions. You basically pay for the compute, and you get your questions answered based on your data. This is possible, yeah.
Well, anyway, switching gears a little bit, I've got a question I'd like to ask about. Nextcloud had filed an anti-competitive lawsuit against Microsoft.
Right. Yeah, it's a complaint. So it's not directly a lawsuit from us to them. Because, they have a few more lawyers that we have engineers. So, there wouldn't be a fun fight. No, we filed a complaint because the EU has antitrust laws. Yeah, if you look at the integration of, let's say, OneDrive in Windows, good luck not signing up. Basically, as a normal person, you were Dropbox or Nextcloud. That's unfair. And Microsoft is using their weight in the desktop market to basically get into the file sync and share market. That's almost the definition. If you have this market share as they do, it's almost the definition of anti-competitive behavior.
I think especially as well in Windows 11, you pretty much have to sign up to a Microsoft account to that, unless you want to.
Right. And if you have a Microsoft account, you have a OneDrive account. That's how it works. They explicitly say that to you in documentation and everywhere else. So basically, not having OneDrive is even a possibility if you use Windows. And let's be honest, Windows is perfectly usable without OneDrive. So that is explicitly done to squeeze others out of that market, including us. So the EU ought to do something about it.
And what are the main outcomes that Nextcloud and Sparkers are hoping to achieve with the complaint?
Level playing field. Yeah. Look, I don't need Microsoft to stop doing OneDrive, but I'd like to get an equal shot. Please. And whether that means they stop bundling it in Windows and forcing it down your throat, or they offer you the choice of multiple options. Either way, it works for me, but it needs to be fair, which it just isn't now.
Playing devil's advocate, what would you say to people who say Microsoft is simply offering convenience for the user?
No, they are, but they should do that they're doing this, of course, not because it's convenient, because there are tons of features that they don't offer, even though they would be convenient. Come on, there are so many anti-features, right? one of the things I always noticed with Zoom, if you join a Zoom call in the browser, it'll tell you to download and open the app. And only once you've tried that 2 or 3 times and it failed, it'll suddenly show you the ability to join by browser.
Yeah.
Why? That's not convenience. That's just because they're trying to get their spyware installed on your system so they can,
That's inconvenient.
Yeah, it is. But Microsoft does the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
And Dropbox and others too. Like with Google, if you share a file, you can only on this file say, I make it available publicly, that anybody with the link can use it. Or I only share it with a couple of people specifically. With Nextcloud, you can make 3 public share links. One of them has write access. One of them is read only. One of them, you can only edit the file in the browser, but you cannot download it. You know what I mean? And send these 3 links to different people. It's not possible at Google.
Yeah.
Why? Well, they want you to create an account. They want everybody to create an account, and then you can have granular permissions like that. Is it technically a possibility? Well, hello, we're a tiny company here in Germany. We can do it, so they can do, but they just don't want it. So the argument Microsoft is just making it easier is like, well, we all know that's not the primary reason they're getting into this market. And if they wanted to make it easy, they could give you choice. They could say, hey, install any app and it'll hook nicely into our ecosystem. So for example, if you're using Microsoft Office on your iPad and you want to save the file, then you can save directly to Nextcloud, to Dropbox, to Google Drive. No, you can't. You can only save directly to OneDrive. It's not possible to save to any others. You, for that, have to export the file. But in the meantime, it'll still put the versions on OneDrive, even if you didn't even ask for that. And you can't replace that. It's not possible. So again, convenience, no way.
I was actually using Word for the first time in many years the other day, and I just saw at the top was a little toggle where you can have auto save. I thought I better do that because my battery's running a bit fast. I want to make sure. And top it goes, you must have a cloud version of the file first. And I was thinking, what?
Yes.
Why?
Uh-huh.
Why do I need a cloud version? Just auto save to my hard drive. Yeah,
No. It's going to the cloud and they want it. And again, do you have an option there to use Nextcloud as the backend for this? I'd be surprised. And so this is not convenience. This is anti-competitive behavior. They'll definitely defend it as convenience, and they will do the same thing as they did with Internet Explorer, Yeah. They were going to get forced to take Internet Explorer out of Windows. So they then built it in so that it was used as a desktop to render the desktop background. Not that anybody wants a web page as a background. You want a picture and icons on it. But they've built in Internet Explorer so deep that when they were forced to take it out, they said, oh no, we can't. Well, that's called strategic incapability, So, and they're going to do the same here. I bet that this whole autosave feature is going to be used as our...
You did that thing with so that's why you had that kind of active web desktop in the old Windows.
Yeah, it was just anti-competitive stuff. Yeah, who's asking for that, right? Who needs a browser? If the user mattered, they would be doing it. Windows 8 was all about getting into the tablet and touch market. Yeah. Did they do that to make the user's life easier? Heck no. They did it because they wanted to go after Apple. And the users are just, you're there to give them money, but otherwise you're not there. They're not there for you. I think they make that crystal clear at every corner.
I heard someone say once, a lot of companies look at the user as an obstacle to the wallet.
Yeah, exactly. And that sounds like Microsoft, yeah.
And it's nice to get a company that puts the user first.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, but again, that's our private motivation, right? We do this because there needs to be a genuine alternative to these big companies. For that, you need to have a good product, because otherwise nobody wants to use it anyway. And Nextcloud is, I don't want to say it's perfect. Every product has flaws, and certainly Nextcloud does. But we have, customers who complain that they're the sysadmins, and they complain that their users like Nextcloud so much that they're pushing to roll it out to more departments, even though they're not ready for that yet. It's just a good kind of complaint to get, in my opinion, right? So, yeah.
Switching gears, I've got a couple of user questions that were posted on the forums. I wonder if I can pose them to you, Jos.
Should.
I've got a question here from user Johnny O, or Johnny Zero, I'm not sure. He says, why is Nextcloud slow across platforms, even on high-end software? And are there plans to improve this? Are there plans to switch from PHP to another programming language for Nextcloud? I think we've kind of spoken to that a bit. And will there be a slimmed-down version of Nextcloud to just use the specific part of it?
Yeah, I can answer that. So performance-wise, this is, as I said earlier, Nextcloud is complicated. And if you've set it up well, and our all-in-one makes it a lot easier, honestly, it's very fast. But yeah, that can be tricky. Look, I don't like to blame the user because I'm sure they know what they're doing. Honestly, my private Nextcloud is also pretty slow, and I haven't figured out how to fix that either.
Yes, as well.
So
it's not just the code of Nextcloud being slow. If you
Right.
have a really poor internet connection, I ran a Nextcloud server at my mum's house where I think she's got 2 megs down and half a meg up. I'm not going to get a good connection trying to send photos and work back.
yeah, that could play a role, but let's assume, because they said, even on heavy hardware, so let's assume it's also in the data center and fast. There is really a lot of the right Redis configuration, the right, patch your Nginx configuration, but also our high performance backends, like you have the high performance backend for files. It's the push notification daemon that I mentioned earlier, the thing in Go. These parts all make a big difference, and it all has to be set up the right way. And honestly, I can't speak to why it's slow in a specific case, but I can guarantee you it can be just very fast, just as fast as like the Microsoft and Google or other products. And so it's not the code, certainly not the PHP that's the issue, because PHP has its pros and cons, but performance is not a problem of PHP, because PHP is pretty fast. And it's the biggest benefit, of course, it's really scalable, right? Because if you want to do 4 times as much, then you just quadruple the number of PHP servers, and you get almost 100% scalability. That's what PHP is good at. The problem for scalability is always the database and the file system. And those are also usually the performance bottlenecks. Of course, I'm sure there's room to improve things in Nextcloud as well. We work a lot of performance always. As I said, we have like components in Go. There's a Rust component to Nextcloud, other pieces. So to get it as fast as possible, you should turn all of that on and install it and configure it, etc. Or use the all-in-one. And that will make a difference. But while there are certain things that PHP can't do, if we would basically stop developing Nextcloud for 2 years to rewrite the whole thing from scratch in Go, and then another 3 years of like stabilizing it all again and fixing all the bugs that we've already fixed in the PHP code, yes, we would be 5 years behind on everybody else in the industry, but no, it wouldn't be really faster. It might even be slower. Because a lot of these things are in architecture, and the language is really the least important thing, the least important part of it. It's the same conversation that you can have about ARM versus x86. It's not the instruction set that makes a difference. Yes, ARM systems are more energy efficient, but if Apple had a license to the x86 code, believe me, they would be the same laptops and the same leaders in performance. And they would be equally good because they put Jim Keller on it and a bunch of other brilliant people. And they made just an unlimited budget chip that is massively huge and runs at low speed and is super efficient. Has nothing to do with the fact that they're using an ARM instruction set. Well, not nothing, but it's like 1%. It's the same with PHP. Maybe it'll be 0.5% or 1% faster. But an architectural choice of how you store things in the database or, how you access the files is going to have a 10x, 100x impact compared to the language itself. So it just wouldn't make the impact that you might think it does. Right. It's really a micro benchmark thing where it makes a difference. But PHP is perfectly capable of being incredibly fast. The last point was about making a slimmed down version of it. Well, you can do that because Nextcloud it consists of apps. I mean, even sharing, which is a pretty core functionality, is an app. But there's a ton you can turn off. If you say, look, I don't use versions, well, turn it off. If you say, I don't use group folders, I don't use guest accounts, I don't use external storage, turn the apps off and they will not be there. But the thing is, it's not going to make a lot of performance difference because we've been optimizing the bananas out of this for, well, more than a decade. And so it'll make some difference for some areas. Obviously loading the page and then the versions takes longer than loading the page, period. So yeah, turn off previews, turn off, icons. If you make your phone black and white, it'll also use a little bit less power. But I mean, is that's really the issue? But it'll help, sure. Yeah, you can do it.
And so I've got another question, a final one, Jos, from that whole guide for anyone. How does the team prioritize enhancements that detect fixes? And he wonders, has the team seen a GitHub issue with syncing files larger than 100 gigabytes? I believe that's to do with Nextcloud and file chunking.
Yeah, with
Cloudflare and
and chunking.
Cloudflare chunking.
I know that issue because I got into that discussion myself. So this is tricky because, as I said before, we're ambitious, right? We want to take on Microsoft. So pure rationally speaking, what you then want is you want to get as close as possible in terms of features and usability and accessibility and all these things that you need, also for companies, right? So both for home users, because that's the ones we do this for, but also for companies because they pay the bill. So you need to balance that. And you need to balance indeed getting to these features without, of course, making it unstable for the majority of users. But with bugs, the issue is that there are multiple kinds of bugs, and they all range from affecting, 1,000 Nextcloud servers, which sounds like a lot, but there are several 100,000 out there, so that's under 1% still. And there are bugs that affect everyone. And I mean, it's obvious that we tackle the bugs from the top of the list, right? We tackle the ones that affect everyone. And that have a big user impact. That's the other part, right? I mean, there can be a bug. Like, for example, right now, we don't like to point out bugs, but it irritates me too, so I'm just going to do it. There is this bug in the comment section where you can mention a colleague. And it does that, right? If you type @Chris, and then it'll autocomplete to Christine, and it'll show you the users, and you click one, and then you post a comment, and then it just says there in pure text @Christine. And it doesn't render this nice thing that you can click on and then contact her, etc. That's a bug. And it affects every single user of Nextcloud for quite a while already. That doesn't affect you. It doesn't make you work harder. It's annoying. It's a visual bug. We'd like to get it fixed, but it affects not your day-to-day work. You can still work. And similarly, you have bugs that are completely crippling and make the system not work for the 3 users that use an external NFS storage together with a Oracle database and have user accounts with space in it. There will be a bug like that affects 3 servers out there. Now, if one of those servers is from a customer that pays us money, it'll get fixed very fast. But if not, I hope you understand this drops to the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
It's just we can't fix everything. And if we only would fix bugs, first of all, there'll still then be another library that gets updated and breaks something, like 0 bugs will never be there. And we will simply lose speed, get further behind on Microsoft, which means less companies will be willing and able to pay for Nextcloud because it doesn't work for them anymore. It doesn't do what they need, which means we can't hire as many developers, and you get in a downward spiral. And the end result is just worse software. It might be a little bit more stable for the 6 months, but once the effect on less customers starts to kick in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a very fine-tuned balance to get the maximum development speed that still allows us to fix bugs to the degree that it doesn't impact most users' experience, but still allows us to sign up as many customers as possible, to hire more developers, to increase the development speed. Because again, we are trying to keep up with Microsoft here. And if you look at the resources they put in Microsoft Teams, because we're growing by 50 to 70% per year. And you can say, wow, without venture capital, fantastic. That's great. Why don't you slow it down a little to fix more bugs for me? I get that. And I mean, again, personally, I'm annoyed by some bugs too, even on my private server. But Microsoft Teams grew by 800% last year. So we are losing ground at a crazy speed by growing just 50%. Yeah, and if you look, and here, I know it's big picture, but if you do a step back and you say, where are we in 10 years? Yeah, we want to be in a space in 10 years where, as a company or as a government or as a consumer, you actually have a choice. And I don't mean the choice between Microsoft, Google, or Apple, but I mean the choice between Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Nextcloud. Or something else, because honestly, it doesn't have to be us, but ideally Nextcloud. Yeah. So if we are 0.01% of the size of them by then, we will not be a viable alternative. There's just no way commercially to make that happen. Think of phone operating systems. I know you're running a pretty obscure operating system.
Yeah.
But what you're running is not a real alternative for the average person. No. There are 2 operating systems on a phone that are usable for a normal person. Why is that? Because in the market, there just wasn't space for a third. And I mean, heck, Microsoft tried to be the third and they failed. Yeah. So you can't tell me that this is nothing other than just purely how hard it is to keep in that market. Yeah. So if 10 years from now, there is only space for 5 players in the file storage and collaboration market, we need to be the number 5, because if we're the number 6, we will not be a viable alternative, an actual choice, because by then there will be huge vendor lock-in effects, just like what we have in the phone world with the App Store. I'm sure there'll be equivalent things, and you actually will not have a choice for Nextcloud, and we want to be there. So we need to maximize speed. And so we need to find this really fine balance between features, bugs, customers, home users. And I can tell you, we're doing it wrong all the time, because this is, a knife's edge. And obviously we're not exactly in the middle there. And you will be able to point me to tons of bugs that may be on one side or the other. Maybe we're doing it wrong. I know. But I hope it explains our priorities and what we're trying to do here. And again, whether it works, maybe not. It's not an easy, balance for sure.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, a lot of looking at the big picture and things down the road. Exactly. You've got to be forward thinking. You can't just thinking of right now.
Yes, exactly. And so again, it's not that we don't care. It's just we're trying to balance. And again, if I have then the choice to help this one customer, because if we fix that or add that feature, like we're working on accessibility at the moment. Yeah, fixing tons of accessibility bugs for people who use screen readers. So more than 350 of these issues have been fixed over the last 6 months. That's a lot of development resources. Yeah, tons of testing and finding these and fixing. And we're not yet at the point we can get a certification. I think. I mean, we might be. They're working towards that. But once we got that, the doors will open for a ton of government contracts. And that will obviously pay this back. I don't know, 100 times over maybe over the next years. I don't know the numbers here, of course, but you can make a calculation there and say, well, yeah, we didn't fix this bug, we didn't fix that bug, but we are investing in this. And this will allow us to fix so much more and develop so many more features. But of course, it'll constantly be this, So, yeah.
But just one step at a time and taking the right steps in the right.
Yes. And again, this is really hard to find this balance. So we're always very open for feedback. But, just saying, look, it annoys me. Yeah, me too. But we have to look at the big picture here, because, Nextcloud wouldn't be here without the big picture, right? And the company wouldn't work without the big picture. So, yeah, sorry, but just the fact that it annoys you cannot be a reason for us to not do it or to do it. It's just how it is.
Just the tool guy's question about Cloudflare. I believe that can be fixed in the actual client by making a change to the config file.
Yeah, so we found a solution for that, I recall from the thread, that if you set some limit in the config file, then that stops it. And look, I hope that the desktop client people at some point have time to basically allow the desktop client to figure this limit out by itself and then put it in by itself.
Right.
Because that should technically be possible. I think somebody even made like a promise of writing that code, and then our devs could just review and approve it. But yeah, that hasn't happened. And I know that the desktop client team has a metric ton of stuff on their plate. I'm married to one of the desktop client developers, and I hear the cries in pain sometimes. Really, they would have fixed it if they could realistically do it. Believe me, they really want to, but they just haven't been able to get to that.
Well, Jos, I can't thank you enough for the time you've given us today and the insights you've given into the world of Nextcloud. I want to give also big thanks to the whole of the Nextcloud team. If you pass on,
no, you're welcome.
And the team thanks, very appreciative of the work we're doing, championing privacy, open source, and taking control of our data. We need more companies like you, and I wish you all of the success going forward. And I hope in 10 years' time, we're not number 5, I hope you're number 3 too.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Yeah, that would simply mean a lot more people have control of their own data, and that's what we need. Just hope that we then still live under, not a supreme leader, but just a decent, society where we still have choice, indeed. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. And I hope also thanks to the community for using Nextcloud, for advocating for it, because really this makes a difference. Like getting Nextcloud in companies, explaining to people why it is important and what's the benefit of being in control of your data, caring about privacy, or just making this AI run locally and just prove that it can be done. This all really makes a difference. And yeah, we wouldn't be where we are without the community, like not just developers, but also people like your community, like the Unrated community and the listeners who, fiddle and fix things and report bugs and talk about it on Reddit and tell other people that this has an impact that made it possible for us as a business also to work and to do what we do. So thank you too.
And thank you very much, listeners, for tuning in today. Keep learning how to take control of your digital life. This is Ed and Jos signing off.
Bye-bye.